Did you make a New Year's resolution this year to lose weight or get fit or optimize your brain health so you can prevent Alzheimer's and stay sharp for life? That's a beautiful goal to have, right? Unfortunately, most people design for long-term health outcomes by focusing on the wrong thing, the wrong place. And then they wonder why they can't achieve their goal, get the results they want. Today, I'm going to show you where you actually want to be focusing. We're going to talk about the stages of change and the barriers to change that you're going to want to make sure that you're addressing. Welcome to Happy and Healthy with Amy, the brain health podcast for women in midlife who want to not just survive, but actually thrive during the menopause transition and beyond. I'm Amy Lang, master health coach, best-selling author, and daughter of Alzheimer's, and I'm here to help you make this next chapter of your life the best one yet. Hi there, Amy here. Thank you so much for joining me today, and welcome back to another episode of the Happy and Healthy podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have a health goal. Maybe it's, I want to prevent Alzheimer's, or maybe it's, I want to lose weight, or maybe it's something like, I want to feel less stressed, right? These are outcomes. And there's nothing wrong with wanting them. That's really what New Year's resolutions are all about, right? But here's the trap. You can't design for an outcome. You can't engineer prevent Alzheimer's or lose weight the same way you'd follow a recipe, right? You can't rely on willpower or motivation in order to reduce your stress. And this is where, unfortunately, most people get stuck, right? They fixate on the destination, whether it's the number on the scale or a particular blood pressure reading, right? Or the feeling of calm. And they skip over the only part they actually can control, which is what they do today. The choices they make today, the actions that they take today. Now, I want to point you to an article that Angela Duckworth, who's a psychologist who wrote the book Grit, penned about situational agency. So Angela Duckworth opens her article with a children's story about the frog and the toad and cookies. So these two friends bake a batch of cookies that are so delicious they can't stop eating them. We need willpower, says the frog. What is willpower? Asked the toad. Willpower is trying hard not to do something that you really want to do. Sound familiar? Right? That internal battle, that war between your aspirational self and your busy, tired, stressed out self, right? Your long-term goals versus your in-the-moment desires. And here's how the story ends. Frog and Toad don't use willpower to stop eating the cookies. They take the cookies outside and scatter them on the grass for the birds. They design their environment to support their goals. So Duckworth's research shows that successful behavior change rarely relies on inner fortitude to resist temptation. Instead, people arrange their lives to minimize the need for willpower or motivation in the first place. So she gives examples like Ed Sheeran and Zadie Smith, who stay off social media by not owning smartphones. or Jennifer Lopez, who carries water and fresh vegetables with her everywhere, right? So again, they're not designing for the outcomes, they're designing for the behaviors. So now let me give you a framework for thinking about this. At the very top, you have outcomes. These are the results you want, whether it's preventing Alzheimer's or losing weight or reducing stress, right? These are not things you have direct control over. Okay. Below that, you have habits. These are behaviors that have become automatic, which makes them sustainable and ultimately part of who you are, right? So for long-term health outcomes, like brain health, these are what matter most. And then below that, you have behaviors. So these are individual actions that, when repeated over and over again, become habits. And these you do have control over, right? And then below that, so now we're talking about the foundation, this is the part that most people miss. And that is you have triggers. These are the cues or the prompts, the things that initiate behavior. And this is where your real leverage is. This is what you have control over. So, BJ Fogg at Stanford, he wrote the book Tiny Habits. He has spent years studying this, and he points out that not all behavior change is the same. So he has this behavior grid where he's identified 15 different types of behavior change. And each one actually requires a different approach. So for brain health, we're typically working with 3 different types. There are new behaviors, which we want to become habits, right? Like starting an exercise routine or beginning a meditation practice, right? These are behaviors that we want to do from now on. Then we have increasing behaviors. So these are things that we're already doing, but we want more of. More sleep, more fruits and vegetables, right? More social connection. And then there's a third category, which is decreasing or stopping behaviors. So here we're talking about less sugar, less alcohol, less processed foods, right? Maybe quitting smoking. So again, each of these requires a different strategy, right? You don't build a new habit the same way you would break an old one. Okay, so now let's talk about the barriers to change. So you know the outcome you want. You've identified a behavior that would move you toward it, right? And you even understand what type of change, what one of those 15 types of change you're looking at. But you find yourself still stuck. This is where the trans-theoretical model and the corresponding barriers to change really create the roadmap for change. So the trans-theoretical model for change talks about 5 stages, sometimes 6 for change. We're talking about pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. Some people call stage 6 relapse. Some people put stage 6, 5, and 6 together. All right. So the trans-theoretical model tells us that change moves through stages, and each stage has specific barriers that keep people from moving forward. And here's what I want you to understand. The barrier tells you where to focus your design efforts. So let me walk you through each one and give you an example. All right. In stage 1, again, we're talking pre-contemplation. This is when someone says, I'm fine the way I am, right? The person doesn't see a need for change, but someone else might recognize it. So, easy example might be someone who's smoking and a loved one who wishes they would quit smoking. So the barrier here is, well, sometimes it's lack of awareness, or sometimes it's denial or defensiveness, right? Someone might say, George Burns smoked, right? And he lived to be 99, never got lung cancer, right? Or someone who has a family history of Alzheimer's might say, my memory slips are just normal aging, or Alzheimer's won't happen to me, or genes are destiny, right? It's just luck of the draw. So if someone's in this stage, more information about how to change won't help. The work here is raising awareness, right? Gentle raising of awareness. So we want to lean into curiosity and not confrontation. In stage 2, now we're talking about contemplation. Okay, this is what I commonly hear as the yes but stage. Okay, so the person knows that there's something they want to change, but they're torn. So the barrier here is most often ambivalence, as in, I want to do something, but not doing something also has a payoff, right? All behavior has a payoff of some sort. So the ambivalence here usually comes from some fear of loss, right? It could be, I know I want to eat healthier, but I'm afraid I'll feel deprived, or I'm afraid I won't be able to hang out with my friends, right? Or it could be, I know I want to exercise more, but I don't want to give up my mornings, right? This is emotional territory. So again, this person doesn't want to let go of the comfort of current behavior, right? Maybe it's even part of their identity, right? Think about, like, I'm an emotional eater is an identity. So if you're here, you don't need a meal plan. You need to explore what's really at stake, right? What do you gain if you change? What do you lose if you don't? What matters most to you in this season of your life? So stage 3 is preparation. This is the I'm ready but stage. And the person wants to change, but again, fear is kicking in. This time it's fear of the process. So maybe it's overwhelm or unsure of how to start. Okay, so if the barrier here is overwhelm, right, an unclear plan, now we're talking about things like self-doubt. So I joined a gym, but I haven't gone because I don't know what to do when I get there, right? So if you're here, this is where environment design starts to matter. This is where you need clear, small, manageable steps. So we don't want to overhaul your diet, right? We want to identify what's one thing you can do this week. Add more protein to your breakfast. Add another vegetable at lunchtime. All right? And then we have stage 4. This is action. This is the I'm doing it stage. You can see visible change happening. But it's also a really vulnerable stage. And here, the barriers are things like environmental triggers, stress, and weak support systems. So it could be like, I was meditating every morning, but then my kids got sick, and so I stopped, right? New behaviors are fragile, and when life starts lifing, it destabilizes them. So if you're in action, you need to identify, anticipate when things might get in the way, like what tends to throw you off track. And then you need to develop your plan B and C and D. So if X happens, I'll do Y, right? And then it really helps to recruit support, accountability partners, as well as being part of a community that helps you celebrate your wins. All right, then we've got stage 5. This is maintenance. This is the I've got this stage, which can be dangerous because sustaining is not the same as done, right? So the barrier here can be complacency, life disruption, identity drift. So, for example, I used to meal prep every Sunday, but life's been so chaotic lately. And if you're here, what you want to do is reconnect with why this mattered to you in the first place, right? You need some identity reinforcement. What helps you stay in touch with that person? And you need some resilience planning too. How do you reestablish rhythms after disruptions? So here's what I want you to take from this. The barriers tell you where you are on the path. And where you are determines what kind of help you actually want to seek. So if you're stuck in contemplation, again, a new meal plan won't help, right? You need to resolve the ambivalence first. If you're struggling during the action phase, you don't need more motivation at this point. You need better support, both your environment, right? How you design your environment, as well as your social support, right? It could be like if you join a gym and you don't know what to do, sign up for a fitness class, hire a trainer, right? We don't want you to wind up getting stuck in overwhelm. So ultimately, it's about meeting yourself where you are, not where you think you should be. And that's where real change can begin. All right. Now, everything that I've shared in this episode, the situational agency, the behavior types, and the barriers to change, these are powerful, right? And they address what I'd call the external environment, the setup of your life, the friction and the flow of your daily routines. But there is another layer, and it's the one that most frameworks miss entirely, and that's your internal environment. So these are the thoughts you don't even notice that are the real triggers of behavior. So next week in part 2, I'm going to show you what I call the trigger before the trigger. Okay? Because here's what I've learned after years of coaching. You can design the perfect environment, and yet there's still a voice in your head that can sabotage everything, right? Thoughts like, I deserve a treat, or I'll start on Monday, or one more glass won't hurt, or I'm too tired, or I don't feel like it, right? These unexamined thoughts are the real triggers for behavior change. And until you learn to see them and redesign them, you'll keep hitting the same walls, right? So that's part 2 of this 2-part series, the internal environment. But for this week, here's what I want you to do. First, identify one behavior, just one, that would move you toward a health outcome that you care about, that you want. Second, name the barrier, right? This means you need to identify which stage you're in. And if you don't have a barrier, that's great. Let's move forward. Okay? Third, identify the things in your external environment to address that specific barrier. Because remember, you can't design for outcomes. You can only design for the behaviors that lead to them. And the first step is knowing exactly where you are, right? So this episode was about providing a roadmap for you to navigate change. Alrighty? So I want to leave you with the following quote by James Clear. All big things come from small beginnings. The seed of every habit is a single tiny decision.